Good afternoon to our friends here in the room and to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Sara Bonella. I am the Deputy Director of SICAM and a co-PI, a member of the Executive Committee of Marvel. So with my two hats, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this new installment of our series of conversations that we have dedicated to Marianne Mansai, one of the pioneering female coders in the domain of simulation and modeling. And today we're lucky to have two interesting and different guests who will help us discover the world of how you tell scientific stories in the domain of scientific journalism, and with some more sort of esoteric approaches like comics and visual storytelling. We will discover more about all of this in a moment. Before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to remind you of some upcoming events that Marvel and SICAM are organizing. So tomorrow, there is going to be the nth installment of the Marvel Junior series, starting at noon. You can find information on the Marvel website. Two young investigators within the project are going to present their work. I'm sure it's going to be interesting for everybody. And if you happen to be on the EPFL campus, I believe that there is pizza associated with the event. A bit later on February 11, 2026, on the United Nations Day for Girls and Women in Science, we continue the SICAM tradition of inviting female members of our community or of neighboring communities to share some of their experiences with us. This is the series that we call From Women's Eyes. And this year we've decided to focus the attention on women who hold positions of responsibility in research infrastructures. And so we're very happy to have with us Gihan Kamel, who is a principal investigator at the Sesame Synchrotron in Jordan, but quite an interesting experience. If you have followed the Marianne Mansai conversation on science and diplomacy, you have already met her. And then we're very happy to have with us also Barbara Montanari, who is instead responsible of computational infrastructure at the STFC Research Institute in the UK. Now, as I mentioned, so what is a Marianne Mansai conversation? Is an opportunity for us to meet and think and talk and discuss topics that are, in the neighborhood of what we do as scientists, but are not your latest technical development or what wonderful algorithm you have invented or the most interesting system that you have just studied. It's really things that have to do with the culture and the intellectual environment in which we live, and that pertain to jobs that are, important for what we do. Today, we talk about science communication, but in the past, we've had speakers who do industrial research using simulation and modeling. We've had a very interesting afternoon spent together with the Olivetti Foundation talking about the first laptop computer that was actually called Programma 101 and came from the laboratories. We have experienced, conversations on the topic of science and diplomacy. And last year, we had the first of this series of two appointments in which we talk about scientific dissemination and scientific journalism. Now, in the first installment last year, we were lucky to have an opportunity to discuss the life and adventures of editors of scientific journals, Nature, for example. Today, we're going to shift the focus from people who do journalism within the scientific world to people who try to take the world of science outside of its natural comfort zone and boundary, and therefore explain what we do or talk about the things that we do to what is called the general public. How are we going to do this? Well, after I stop blabbing, I will be happy to give the stage to our two speakers. We start with Sarah Ibrahim from the Swiss Info broadcasting company here in Switzerland. And then we move to Roberto Natalini, who is a scientist and a mathematician, director of the Institute for the Applications of Calculus at CNR in Italy, but who is here today in a slightly different persona, let's say. They both have up to 30 minutes to tell us a little bit in a very free, relaxed format, whatever they want to tell us in order to explain to us their life and professional journey. I would like to ask you not to exceed 25 minutes because it would be nice to have an opportunity for some specific questions on the content of what you're going to present. I would ask the audience in the room and the audience online to ask questions by all means, but please keep them focused and short on the topics of the presentations because you will have plenty of time to ask more general questions in the second part of today's event after a short break, which is going to be a conversation between our two speakers and guests, moderated by Nicola Nosengo, who is here in his capacity as a communication director of the Marvel NCCI. For those of you who are here, there'll be an aperitif afterwards. For those of you who are online, sorry, you cannot join us this time. Hope to see you here next time. Now, if you are following online, to ask questions, just raise your hand using the Zoom tool, and you will be invited to unmute your mic, and you will have an opportunity to ask the questions directly to our speakers. Okay, I think that this is really all that I wanted to say. As usual, we don't, take the time to go through formal and long presentations of our speakers. Today, this is particularly apt because they will have the time and the chance to introduce themselves as they see better for this particular format. So thank you very much for your attention. And Sarah, if you want to come here and start.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. It's a pleasure for me to talk a bit about what it means to be a science journalist and about my path. My name is Sarah Ibrahim. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a journalist covering mainly science and tech at Swissinfo. I will have a chance to talk to you about our daily work, behind the scenes of what we do, and then I would like to understand if you know Swissinfo, if you read us, that would be really interesting. So I think, and you probably agree, and I hope that it's very clear that the world needs good science journalism more than ever. Actually, the world needs good journalism in general more than ever, but also science. We saw it's very sensitive at the moment to things like phenomenon like fake news, to social media, where we see spreading all kinds of information, sometimes even AI generated, so generated by machines and not proved in terms of sources and in terms of what the content says. And we see also very powerful men and women. We see here an AI generated picture of Pope Trump being entitled not only to their opinions, but also to their own facts. What it means is that one of the most powerful person in the world said things like taking paracetamol for a pregnant woman is dangerous, or that vaccines can cause autism. And we can laugh about that, but if we think that there are millions of people actually believing in this, it's really an explosive consequence that we can have in terms of health at the general level of citizens, children, women and men, and for science as well. So our work as science communicators and your work as scientists, as researchers, is more important than ever in this context. But now I want to switch to my story to tell you a bit about myself. You see there a little lady, this one in this fancy dress. This is me. I was kind of 3 or 4 years old, and this picture was taken in Cairo, in the apartment of my grandparents. They passed away, unfortunately, some years ago, but still this apartment is there in a very ancient area of Cairo called Heliopolis. So it's a Greek word meaning the city of the sun. Is one of the most ancient neighborhood of Cairo. And I think this picture tells you already something about myself, I lived in two worlds, so Egypt on one side and Italy on the other side, because my mother is Italian, my father Egyptian, and across culture. So languages, communication, translation, cross-cultural translation was something that was really always very important to me, and that really also, let's say, influence as well my path, even now that I'm also a journalist today. So there is this little lady, she was, and she still is a very curious person, even though, let's say, my inclinations were not on science, but mainly on human studies. So I was always very interested in languages, literature, writing, and history, these sorts of subjects. Less, let's say, in scientific subjects, but I think it has to do also with the models that I had. I didn't have the fortune, the luck to have role models or inspiring math and science teachers. On the contrary, I had the traumatic experience as a child when I was discriminated for my origins by my math teacher. I was 6 years old at the time. I didn't want to go to school, so I tried to find all the excuses not to go. And I think this really left a mark on me, even though then this sad story, let's say, ended well for me, because the teacher apologized at the time. But I think, just to say that also our choices are influenced by the people that we know on our path, because science came to my path later, when I was already a professional, after I graduated in Middle Eastern Studies and Languages, by chance. By chance, I understood and I encountered science and technology and how fascinating was to me. I started working, let's say, my first ordinary job after graduating was for a B2B publisher, so a business-to-business publisher of industrial magazines, so really magazines about innovations at an industrial level and mainly addressed to specialized professionals. So I started there, and it was for me a kind of an introduction, also a training, a school. I traveled the world, and you see the second picture was taken in Taipei. So I really went to many countries in my late 20s to see firsthand what these companies were doing in terms of innovation. And there, during these years, I understood that what's happening at the industrial level will also at one point behind these companies will influence our life too. And so I began to think that I wanted to transfer this to the general public. I wanted the public to understand the extent and the importance of what's happening in terms of innovation and technology, and how this would impact their life at one point. So I changed my life. It was probably the 30 years crisis, and I left Milan, where I was working and living. I went to Paris, not for specific reasons, just because I had already acquaintances there, so it was easier to kind of find a way through to daily life there. And I started my own, let's say, freelance activity as journalist in Paris, still, however, collaborating a lot with B2B publishers. So I had my safe foot there, where I already was established as an editor, but I started and collaborated with different journals. And then at one point I came across with Sinfo. The reason is because my partner that now it's my husband is Swiss, and during the COVID pandemic, I knew at one point that I would move from Paris to Switzerland because it was very hard to kind of maintain a distant relationship during COVID. And I started then to collaborate with Swissinfo as a science journalist, but a freelancer. And at the time at Swissinfo, there were some changes already happening. As Swissinfo, I don't know if you know it. I would like to know from you if you heard about it. The people, at least the people here, have you ever encountered Swissinfo or heard about it? Yes, Swissinfo is the international website, let's say, of the Swiss radio and television. We publish in 10 languages, mainly feature articles, so in-depth articles and a bit less news, let's say, in 10 languages. So we really cover broad kind of spectrum in terms of the geography of the world with our 10 languages, and we focus on different topics. One of them is, of course, science. Our science coverage is divided into mainly climate and AI, and I'm one of the main reporters of artificial intelligence, our artificial intelligence beat. So as I said, I was collaborating with them. At the time, the science beat was still in the process to be built, but Swissinfo really wanted to expand the coverage of science. And so they were looking for good communicators there, good journalists that could really translate the complexity of science and tech to a general audience. So I had the luck there because even though I didn't have training as a journalist, I had a previous experience, my B2B experience, as I was saying, and there was this shift towards more science happening already, I would say 10 years ago, where scientific journalists were really needed at one point. So I understood that and I tried to leverage that, and that's how then I was able to enter Swissinfo. So at the beginning I was a freelancer, but then I had the chance to really become an employee and to work there on a daily basis. So now I want to kind of let you enter our world, so how it works, the editorial side, journalistic side, when we talk about science too. For a media like Swissinfo, we are not an extreme big media. We are kind of 100 people, of which I would say 50 are journalists, and the rest marketing, communication, and so on and so forth. But we have also a network of people working with us and for us from all over the world. Swissinfo is a complex world, I would say. As I was explaining, we are working in 10 languages, so imagine how complex could be to produce article that then should be not always, but sometimes translated in all these languages and distributed across all these regions of the world. So we have sometimes processes that could be heavy. We start discussing our stories, ideas at our meetings. These are meetings happening every week, where with other journalists we try to pitch to our editors the stories, ideas that we have in mind. Sometimes we just read some news that could be interesting, but we don't know if there is really a story behind it. So we try to discuss and to also doing this understand if really there is meat for a story. Because what I think it's very important to for an audience like you to understand, for us, results, for instance, from a research, very interesting research, results from that or fundamental research is not necessarily a story if there is not a consequence on the real world. So we have to understand what are the consequences, what's at stake for the ordinary person. Why should the ordinary person matter or care about this topic, even if scientifically speaking can be very promising? So we discussed that together as a group. When we get the green light to proceed with the story, we start with our research, we start with our interviews, and then we, of course, write the story. After this process, there is the editing of the article. Also, this can be a very time-consuming and not always simple activity. So the relationship with the editor is also sometimes a bit tense, but it should be like that, because to get a good story, you have also to consider different aspects of it. And sometimes and probably you have the same experience when you are really into something, sometimes you miss some parts or you miss the meat. So we want to be sure that the promises, the initial promises and premises of the article are then fulfilled at the end of the article, to have a story that really makes sense. Of course, another part that is really important for us is also the distribution. So it's not enough to write a story. You have to kind of be sure that it will arrive to the right people, the right audience that you need. And we leverage social media. So social media also, as I said before, they are an amplifier of fake news, of content generated by we don't know exactly whom, but that the people read and the people sometimes trust. So it's important also for mainstream media, for media like us, to be there and to leverage the power of social media, because people can really reach us there, and this can make the difference between reading just a feed full of fake news and reading a feed that has also some checked content there by authoritative sources. So we want to be there, but of course, this is also a way for us to fight, to counteract this booming of fake news, misinformation that is happening online. Not that misinformation and disinformation are new. It's nothing new. This was always used as a way to manipulate people, always. It's as ancient as politics, probably. But today, the danger with the internet and with this media is that it's really easier to amplify all this news, fake news. So starting from really something very dumb, you can make really a case out of it with millions, if not billions of people involved. So for us, it's really, really important to be present there. Another point is, of course, I'm a reporter about AI, but I also am a user, right? So how can we use AI in a way that makes sense and that don't make our readers think, oh, is there really a human behind that, or is there an AI? So we want to be sure that also the readers understand how we use this important tool. I say important tool because, yes, AI can be our best friend when we talk about our daily work as journalists. It helps us enormously to save time. Think just about if sometimes I have a long investigation or a reportage, I can have 10 or more interviews. Sometimes the interviews that are 1 hour or more long. Imagine transcribing by hand all of these. Today, I just upload the interview on a tool, and the tool will transcribe it. And if I want, I can use chatbots, and the tool will extract the best facts, the best quotes from it. So this is really very powerful, very valuable, but it can be also our worst enemy because it's so convenient as a journalist to just ask ChatGPT, write me the incipit of my article with this, and this characteristic. But what happens then? It happens that you will have content that is not verified because we don't understand exactly how AI choose the sources, what are the criteria, if the sources ever existed, because sometimes the AI makes strange mix of things that actually are online, so sources that could be authoritative and things that comes from other places or that it made completely up. So you cannot trust this tool ultimately to really produce something. And also, I would say, as journalists, you'll risk to lose your own voice, which is very important today, especially if we don't want to lose our job because AI will replace us. We have to show that we are humans and show our real voice, show that we are there, that we talk on the ground to the people, that there are stories and people behind it and not just machines and predictions and facts made up a bit without like that and without really a check behind it that is human. So we should be always careful about that. There is also an important fact. Just 5 minutes, really?
Take 10, I think, but no more.
Yeah, because I think then we will speak more about that with Nicola later, but you are also a part of our work that is very important. The researchers, the scientists, the professors, I am so grateful that I can rely on all these resources, all these knowledgeable people that make my life so interesting, really. Talking with professors, to researchers, to PhD students who really spend hours, days, months, years of their lives on one single topic. I really have a lot of respect. But don't forget that we pass our time, we spend our time as journalists on different topics, and we have to bear in mind who our audience is. And in most of the cases, general public cannot go into depth. So I always try to tell people interested in understanding how to kind of handle the relationship with journalists. Please explain to us things as you would do to your grandmother, because this is the best way to make things understandable for our audience. So I think this is also an very important part of scientific communication, be able to be also grounded in the way it is explained. And another important point is that science journalism, I think today, it's not just about science, of course. We have to think that it has a huge impact. What you do, what we do, it has a huge impact on people, on communities, and it is also about who is left behind, because let's not forget, science, unfortunately, and tech doesn't reach everyone. We know that a big part of the world is still deprived of an internet connection. It means that it cannot access a lot of tools, a whole ecosystem of tools, digitals and AI-based. So this is a huge problem today, and we as journalists, we have also to take in mind that there are these people that need also to be part of the narrative. So to finish, I think the message here is that we need good science journalism to rebuild trust in good science. So we have good journalists, we have good scientists. We need to be always kind of aware that the trust people having us can be also lost very easy, especially today, and work as allies as much as possible to rebuild this trust. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Don't run away, please.
No.
Let's see if there are a couple of
True,
questions.
questions are
Exactly. Let's see if there are a couple of questions from the audience in the room or online. Federica.
I thank you for what was quite interesting. I was interested more in how you use AI in a day-to-day, because you were mentioning that you use it, but then you don't trust it. So where do you draw the line?
Yeah, it's important to understand, for instance, that you cannot use AI to base your research on it. So you have to reach out to the people, you have to conduct real interviews with experts. In my case, I interview a lot of experts, people sometimes even that are affected by technology, for instance, professors, as I said, PhD students. And you can use AI to kind of have some inspiration to try to find new sources. This is also a good way, but not base your research on that. This is, for me, this is kind of the basis where you say no. And also use ChatGPT, for instance, or these kind of tools, not to start writing your articles, but at the end, when you already wrote it, to have some help to fine-tune some parts that maybe are too long or too repetitive, to find inspiration how to make it better in terms, for instance, of headlines, of keywords. So be smart and use it at the end and not use it at the beginning of your work, because it will also influence your storytelling, because these are not at all neutral tools. So let's not forget that.
Thank you, Sarah. Lydia, you had a question? No?
Maybe
Yep.
a quick one, which is a bit more specific on Swiss Info, so it's good to ask it here. The fact that you publish in so many languages, right? So, I mean, the different languages have their own style of writing. We all know in Italian we write in a way, in English in another, in French yet another. So I was wondering if you have some sort of you know, style book on how to construct articles, the structures, etc., to make sure that then it works in every language and it doesn't sound, you know, like a translation, which often happens when you translate stuff. Actually.
Yeah, you're right, completely. It can be very complicated because also culturally there are different ways of thinking. I think about my colleagues, Japanese journalists, they think in another way, as it doesn't mean that is wrong, right? We have guidelines, internal guidelines on how to conduct research, on how to put together articles, on how to use, for instance, translators, automatic translation, and how to enhance that with adapted content based on the geographic area of the translation. So we use that, and we don't have to forget also as part of the public media ecosystem, we have also strict guidelines in terms of the tone of our articles. We try to be always neutral, to be balanced. You will see the difference immediately if you read one article written by Swiss Info and by another media that could be the New York Times or even in Switzerland, I think about Tagesanzeiger, Le Temps. You will see immediately the difference of the tone. So yeah, we do have that, and it's important to have.
So Lydia had a question.
Yeah. So are all the articles translated in the 10 languages, or depends on
No.
of the topics?
No, we don't have the capacity to do that, and not all the topics are interesting for every language. So this is typically when an article is translated in all the languages is decided by our editorial board. They decide which topics are really interesting for everyone. Otherwise, the editorial offices with the different languages, they are very autonomous and they normally pick the stories that really speak to them the most.
So if there are no more questions, maybe Sarah, you could answer mine and just give me an idea of what these 10 languages are, or maybe just what are the geographical areas that you target.
I think everywhere. So we have, of course, the 3 national languages. Then we have English, which is important. We have Spanish. We have Portuguese. We have Chinese, Japanese, Russian. We had for a while also Ukrainian. Now not anymore. So Arabic. We have Arabic. I think these are all the 10 languages. Yes.
That's interesting because it sort of also gives an idea of the areas that you're reaching out to. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you.
Roberto, would you like to come? Okay, now we have this moment of suspense to see if the connection works. See? Okay.
So, clearly my profile is a bit different from Sarah. I am a mathematician. In fact, I am the director of the Leaders Institute in Italy for Applied Mathematics. And so, my institute is in 4 different towns, Florence, Rome, the main group of researchers in Rome, and then Bari and Naples. And we work for the National Council of Research in Italy. And first of all, I started from pure mathematics. I got my PhD in France, not in Italy. And I worked typically on something very similar to what maybe you do. So long series of integrals, estimates, and so on. But I work in an institute of applied mathematics. So the idea was to focus on specific problems. I started to work on, for instance, traffic flows, cars, many years ago. And we introduced some continuous models on networks, so it was innovative at the time. I work on a very original topic, but quite familiar in Italy, is conservation of cultural heritage. So how the monuments have a degradation influenced by pollution, weathering, and so on. And we created in my group the first mathematical models of this kind of degradation, and fluid dynamics, which is typical topics for. But it is in some sense the background. We use the ideas from fluid dynamics to do traffic or damage or pollution on monuments and so on. And recently I worked on the movement of cells, how cells aggregates to create, for instance, new bodies or how cancer develop in human organisms and so on. So that's my background. Then, why I started to do communication science? Because I am a scientist, so it's not my job in some sense. But first of all, because mathematics is not very popular. If you start to speak with, I need to discuss with the non-mathematician. Unfortunately, I'm lucky. I have to discuss with other people. And when you start to discuss with other people, usually the idea they have of mathematics is quite different with the idea I have this discipline. So there is a gap. Usually you have to start from scratch to explain why mathematics is important for industry or for cultural heritage or for biologists and so on. So that's I need some skill to discuss non-technical terms with people. And also I have to say that I have a failure. A failure because I work in a big institution. CNR is the biggest institution in research in Italy. Many years ago, in 2007, unfortunately, we published a small news in the website of CNR about Tombola. Tombola is big, Tombola, but also in English is Tombola, maybe. And but just it was a curiosity, just to say that, for instance, it's better to have your card are all different numbers, so 90 numbers. You have no repetition and so on. But it was just a curiosity during Christmas holidays. And Corriere della Sera asked me for an interview about that. And I was really naive because I discussed it for 1 minute about that. And I wanted to present my institute. So my research, the institute of my colleagues, the research of my colleagues and so on. And finally, the article on Corriere della Sera was a 1 page just about Tombola. With also discussion, okay, that's useful that people are working on that, or as a research, as original research of CNR. It was not. So I mean, it was a big failure for me because I was not expert enough to understand that it was a trap in some sense. It was not the way to present my institute. So I started to discuss with other people, and a lot of time you have this problem that in communication, in particular communication and mathematics in Italy, you have a big person, some scientists who are very well known, and so they go to TV or in the radio, on the journals and so on. They monopolize the information because they have a big personality. And usually the current stuff, the real research is not really presented to the large audience. And so with other people, with colleagues in many other universities, not only in CNR, we created MadMaths. MadMaths is a website, started in 2009. And the idea was to give a perspective of mathematics from people who work in mathematics with the help of communicators. We need some journalists, some people with a skill in communication, but we want to present to what we are really doing in our research. And so that's now almost 17 years old website. That's a screenshot of what it is now, but probably change it is going. And we created an association where people can join our group. We can organize events, podcasts. We have a lot of people entering. The audience is mixed. We have teachers, we have researchers from university, we have students, curious people, and so on. And quite a young audience. Now it is difficult because recently Google Analytics stopped to take the identity of people, so you don't know really. But from Facebook we can know something still. But it is a large part is a quite young person. And we started with a newsletter recently, 2 years ago, on Substack, and also we have some podcasts. So that's a first part of what I did. But it was not enough for me, because my problem is that when you do communication of mathematics in a website, or even in events like, I don't know, a fair, a science fair, or a science festival, what happens is that the people coming, they are already wanted to listen to you. So they are motivated to come, but it's not really what we wanted to do. We want to reach other people. So the idea is to do something which is a bit independent of motivation. And we created with CNR a sort of comics initiative we call Comics and Science. The title is quite not really original. Comics and Science in Italian, not in English. And Comics and Science because there is a large fair of comics in Italy, Lucca Comics and Games. So Comics and Science was a national idea. And I did with my friend Andrea Plazzi, who was a mathematician, his background, but Andrea was also a great expert of comics. I'm not an expert of comics. Now I become an expert of comics, but in the beginning I was just a scientist. And the idea was that's the first number of Comics and Science. At the beginning, with publication was just 1 volume per year. And here we invited Cédric Villani. At the time, he just got the Fields Medal in Lucca for just to meet other people, and with the comic artist Leo Ortolani, one of the best known comic artists in Italy. And the idea was to make a joke, to create something which was fun. And people come to the presentation with Cédric Villani and Ortolani. And it was just to create an engagement. So people come to buy or to see to read the comics, but they can start to discuss with a mathematician or a physicist or a biologist. So the idea is to create a motivation to come, which is independent from the interest in science. Another experience which was parallel is the director of this journal for teachers, Archimede, and the very famous comics illustrator Giuseppe Palumbo, who is the creator of the new generation Diabolic comics, prepared this for the first number under my direction, this short story in 2 tables about Archimede. And the idea was to tell the story about the lost manuscript of Archimedes, which was found at the end of the 19th century. And he prepared a lot of drawings, which were then inscripted in this picture, which was in a book by Archimedes. So it was a reference also of geometry. And this one is one of the original. And okay, here you find this motto by Poincaré, which is in some sense a motto for our experience, but we changed the words because la géométrie est l'art des raisonnements corrects à partir des figures mal dessinées. The geometry is the art about thinking rightly on the bad drawings. And yeah, our idea is just to replace this bad by the good pictures. And it was a reference also the fact that when you do mathematics in particular, we start from math, you have to draw something. It's a very visual. Mathematics is a visual science because you have to see also equation, you have to see the symbol. So to translate with comics was quite natural for us because you can tell the stories in a quite right way. And a good rule to do good communication, a very professional team working for you. And so I met with people, in particular Andrea, is really, for me, one of the greatest experts in comics, but also organizer around comics. And we started this joint venture. We published a lot of, with many of the Italian artists, Paolo Pettinato, we had Silver, Zero Calcare, and others. Just to give you the impression how to do that, with Claudia Flandoli, who is a young comics artist, we try to introduce the story by Fibonacci in Pisa. Claudia was living most of her life in Pisa, so she knows very well the town. But we try to introduce some basic arguments in mathematics, the scholar arguments like proportions and so on, by using comics, just to try to point out the originality of Fibonacci, who introduces the numbers and the modern algebra in Europe. We worked with SICAM, and we realized that 2 different stories. So one is about SPC, And so you see here that this children by this person who is a sort of scientist is a transformation of Sara Bonella, I can say. Is okay, HPC is high performance computing, and the idea is to tell the story how a simple model can be improved to be more realistic, to try with a lot of work to reproduce the reality. So the idea of mathematical models was translated in the story. And we also had this other story about women in algorithms. So the idea with Sara Nenetti and Susanna Raule, under the supervision again by Sara Bonella, was to create a story, a mystery history about a young lady solving a mystery crime by using algorithms. And it was one of our first experience with translating this comics book in a presentation, a sort of theater representation in Genoa in the Festival of Science. With Sara, we went there last year, and the two actors were able to tell the story using the pictures of the comics story, but also by using arrangement by theater and last issues of our books. And now I want to finish with a case study about Vito Volterra. Vito Volterra was a mathematician and physicist. Okay, more mathematician than physicist. And I have just 5 minutes for that. And he was the founder of CNF. So we want to tell the story because almost nobody now in Italy knows about Vito Volterra. Vito Volterra for mathematicians is very important. He invented this full class of equations. It was very important for the birth of functional analysis, integral equations, and so on. Here, Vito Volterra, the original one. So we produced it with Feltrinelli, but still under the supervision of Andrea Pazzi and myself, and CNR publishing house, both a graphic novel and a show, a theater show. And here the two, we are not artists, so we need professionals. So Alessandro Bilotta was the author of the script plot, and Dario Grillotti for drawings, actually watercolors. So quite a specific technique. So you start from a script, like in a movie, where people try to adapt the story by this person, this mathematician, in terms of a narrative which can be translated in drawings. It's not easy, this part, because for Bilotta knows nothing about mathematics, so we spent a lot of time discussing about the life by Vito Volterra, what the studies, and so on, translating even abstract mathematics. Here, some of, at beginning, because it is known that Volterra, when he was very young, he read From the Earth to the Moon by Jules Verne, and then he dreamed to solve the equation to go to the moon. And here there is Volterra in Pisa when he was student in normal school. And here the birth of the functional analysis of the science of drift function as a point in the infinite dimensional space. And the meeting with his future wife, and famous talk by Volterra about the mathematics of the future, the modern mathematics, biology, mathematics, economy, finance, and so on. But in 1901, so the really long time ago, this is the complete talk, when he refused to be associated with fascism in 1931, and he was put out from the university. And here the idea of this first model about biology and the population of fishes, which is the Lotka Volterra models. And here the final table. And preparing this conference, I had to realize that I was near the Limano Lake. And so there is Volterra was here, not really here, but in Ginevra. And he was considering the seiches, which are this oscillation of the water of this Limano Lake. And he wrote some papers about that, with an explanation coming from some Poincaré ideas. And here with the artist, really, this is not the Limano Lake, probably it's the Monte Massaciuccoli Lakes, because our artist coming near Pisa, was born near Massaciuccoli. And here is the idea that Volterra himself was entering inside the water to study these oscillations, and he found the equation written under a stone in the bottom of the lake. So there's a transfiguration of this kind of research by comics. So just I finish here. There's there's some exhibition inside. Here is the grandson of Vito Volterra, named Vito Volterra, and there are other grandchildren of Volterra. And we were in Lincei in Rome, in Lincei in Rome, and also we make some theater presentation. I was Volterra for this occasion with a real actress and not an actor. And also the drawer was doing watercolors during the show. Okay, so we presented from school. It was quite successful. So an experience of translating different contents with different media, with people, even different audience, school or Lincei, where you have a professor coming from this exhibition, and so I stop here.
Thank you, Roberto. Do we have questions here in the room or from our friends online?
Yeah, thank you, Roberta. One question about, you cover a lot of topics, as we saw with your covers, etc. So I wondered how you involve maybe scientists outside your own group, your own team, to consult on these projects, and how easy or difficult it is for them. It must not always be easy, because it's a completely new experience for most people.
Yeah, but you have to imagine that mostly people, when you start to do that, they call you. They call by phone, or they come to some show and so on, asking to do the same. Because really, this scientific community is made from nerd people in general. So most of them, they are experts of comics. For instance, you have a project in Marvel, but there are a lot of people reading Marvel comics. Not the same Marvel, but they are very popular. Or Mickey Mouse in Italy. In Italy, Mickey Mouse is very important for our background. I think that everybody in Italy read Mickey Mouse in some part of his or her life. So, I mean, this common background for scientists is very important. So it was not difficult. The difficulty was, first of all, just to keep them, slowly, because it was very difficult to manage the programming of this kind of comics, and also to explain that we are not looking for something which is didactic. I mean, we are not explaining science using comics. We are creating curiosity in people to look forward after the comics. The comics is not an explanation. We cannot replace the news or books or the study of something. You cannot learn mathematics or physics by just reading comics. And this was very difficult because people, when they come, they want to explain their theory by using comics, which is different and not very fun.
If I may add from our personal experience, I think that something that was really, really interesting for us was to interact not just with Roberto and Andrea, so the editors, but then the screenwriter that they chose for us. And already this matchmaking takes talent because you need to understand, how to pair people that will be able to talk to one another. And then, it's a few hours on Zoom and a few iterations on different ideas.
It was during COVID.
This was also during COVID, but I mean, there is a lot of communication that goes into this. And I know that I went in with not many preconceived ideas, but I learned so much in the process that this is useful and something that I would really recommend as an experience. Do we have more questions? Yes.
How have all these initiatives been funded?
The what?
Where does the money come from?
How do you fund this?
Okay, first of all, we have a funding from CNR, because this is a series by the National Council of Research in Italy, which is a partial funding. We sell these comics, and this is an important part because sometimes, very often, we also do some comics for some projects, and so we can distribute for free. But just like psychoanalysis, you have to pay to do something. And if people, they spend, I don't know, €7 or something like that to buy our comics, probably they are going to read it. And so it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's possible. And that's, we have, the funding from CNR is 1/3 of the real cost of one comic. You have to find on the market the money. And another part is that comics are not very expensive. It's not like, to do a very good movie or to do other form of communication might be more expensive than comics. Comics finally is quite affordable. So depends on what.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then I think we can thank Roberto and Sara again. Take a very short break, about 10 minutes, just to give us the time to change the setup of this room and move to the second part of today's event, which is the conversation between Nicola Nosego and then Rengo, Sara, and Roberto. Thank you. Don't go away.
Okay, welcome back everyone, also online, and we now get into the more interactive, let's say, part of the conversation, the one that actually deserves the word conversation, where we bring our two speakers together to sort of converge or compare their experiences on a few topics. We have heard the two quite different styles of communication. If you want, the battlefield of journalism, of online journalism, of covering a beat daily or weekly, and using words, the baseline medium of communication to communicate to people, and instead if you want more, for sure, more long-term and long-form style of communication with the comics, visual, etc., and also appealing to a very different audience. Now, I would like to start by asking you what is your opinion and your personal experience of dealing with the kind of topics that this community where we are here today deals with, which is, computational stuff, a lot of mathematics involved. By the way,
And it's also something that, if you want, is very close to the theme of AI, of artificial intelligence, which is so crucial today, and you said is one of the main topics of your conference. Now, my question is, how do you deal, how difficult it is to communicate these sciences that are so formal, so abstract, right? There's so much things that you can't really explain to your audience often, unless you take shortcuts, metaphors, etc. So you kind of risk of just communicating a black box, just focus on applications, etc., possible results. But it's very hard to communicate to non-specialists what is really going on with AI, with computational material science, these kind of things. So both with the written part and with the visual style, how difficult is that, and what strategies you use to cope with it?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah, please.
It's difficult because in our case we know our audience, but not kind of so in detail. We have a broad audience in every country of the world, and sometimes these are people who come to our website and then go away and don't come again. So it's difficult to really grasp who is your reader. And as I said before, we cover a lot of AI, and these sort of subjects are very, very abstract. So I think even just, for instance, a very trivial example, choosing a good picture for an article can be also a challenge. And we know that the picture is something that grasps the attention of the reader, and so it's kind of important as something that accompanies the article. So yeah, the challenge is there. As I said in my presentation, I think for us, for science journalists, tech journalists, it's important to really understand what are the implications and the consequences daily for the people of what research do. And this is, of course, the hardest challenge, because most of the research done in places like here is fundamental research, and we don't know the results and the consequences immediately. So yeah, probably a good part of good stories, of good research done, we don't cover for the reasons that it's too far away at that time from the reader.
Yeah. Roberto, you are a mathematician, so the issue of...
Yeah, in fact, there's a problem, because, you know, if you speak about, I don't know, applied physics, biology, medicine in particular, people can pretend because it is not real that they understand. Black hole, people, I know very well, black holes.
I think they know, yes, I think they know.
So really, that's a visual part which is already in the imaginary of people, and you see movies about black holes. So about mathematics, it's very difficult to do a movie. If you look at the movies like Beautiful Mind or Imitation Games, usually mathematics is just on the background, and you don't understand mathematics looking at these kind of movies. So it's very difficult, because if you have a mad scientist, a mad mathematician implied, it's very difficult to speak about mathematics, because even if for us the visual part is important, very important, it's not the same for ordinary people. So you have to translate these ideas in something which is concrete for people. But the main problem, and that's my idea, we are working not information. Information is very hard, because you have to grasp just the attention of the people for a few minutes. And we pretend to do a long-term work where people are curious, they start to be interested in some topic, they look to something near your story and so on. So that's a long-term work. And the idea is just to create the interest of people. they have to take this story and they start to think about that. Then they have to discover something. So you have to, the curiosity of the discovery is the main, the motor of this kind of operation of communication of science. And so, I mean, mathematics, I pretend that mathematics is a real stuff, is common sense. There's nothing really abstract in mathematics. Mathematics start all the time from real problems in all history of mathematics. So if you can give to the people this kind of feeling that the mathematics is under the hands, you can touch mathematics, you have a good starting point.
Yeah, which brings us back to the point of searching for the impact of science on the actual lives of people, at least connections with their actual lives, which you were also mentioning in the talk. Maybe a quick reminder that people online can ask questions pretty much whenever they want. I mean, I'm happy to give precedence to questions both here and online. So I think that you just have to raise your hands and someone, Cornelia there, will let me know that we have a question. Now, I want to stay just for the next question on the topic of AI, but from the, let's say, seen from the other side of the barricade, which is how you can use it actually in your daily job, and already you mentioned something about it, because you know, indeed it is already transforming the job of whoever does communication. There's a lot of debate in editorial teams, for example, on how to use it better, on whether it will, you know, take away jobs, etc. And so maybe this time I start from Roberto, because you know, maybe it's a little less obvious, but also in the fields of visual communication, of producing drawings, etc. I mean, it's a fact that stuff that 10 years ago would have required a human hand by definition now can be produced by each of us in a few seconds with a model.
That's a problem also for the comics author, for illustrator. Yeah. And we hosted a meeting last year about there's a national organization about AI Act, because after AI Act at the European level, now in some sense copyright has to be protected, but it is very difficult to enforce this kind of decision. So a lot of people are publishing drawings and illustration, and they are got by this kind of artificial intelligence and use it to produce other stuff which is similar. I mean, in some sense, they are very bad. I mean, you can produce by artificial intelligence bad drawings, very bad drawings. So the artistic feature, we are looking for a good artist, looking really pretty, I mean, artistic. It's difficult to reproduce by artificial intelligence. And so, in my idea, we have to protect people, because anyway, for daily use, people can use this kind of imaging. They can try to use less money, and so people can lose their job just because for normal information. You can use this kind of picture produced by artificial intelligence. But for artistic creation, I don't think it is a problem. And also in general, to write a script, to have good ideas, original ideas, as what we look for. I'm not convinced that you can produce a good story just by using artificial intelligence, at least in my opinion, because of this kind of twist, the plot, where you see the touch of the author, is very difficult to be reproduced for the moment, at least in my experience.
Sarah, I will ask a very direct question, because you already mentioned in your talk the fact that it can be useful, it is useful already in many ways for the work of a journalist. But do you think AI is going to actually, contribute to the further shrinking editorial teams, losing jobs for journalists, etc.? Is it going to replace entirely parts of the journalistic work and teams?
Unfortunately, it's already happening. So I would like to say the opposite, but I don't want to close my eyes on a reality of the fact that our industry, the media industry, is even more under pressure. It's under pressure because of budget decisions. The budget now is going not anymore on journalism websites, but on Google websites and all these big tech companies. And it's also part of this tech revolution, the fact that AI is making, for instance, news very easy to do, because there you don't need that human touch, as we were saying before, for the news part. So yeah, I see the danger of it. And that's why I think we should really be careful when we, as journalists, we use AI. I don't agree with parts of my colleagues who refuse to use it. I think it doesn't make any sense to just refuse technology. We know that it's part of our life and it will be more and more. So in my opinion, it's better to know how to use it and to leverage it, but in a very intelligent way that can boost our work, because it can, and not kind of hide the humans behind the words. So I think there is still the possibility to catch up the AI revolution, but to do that we have to work kind of consciously in editorial teams.
And which is still an open problem for most editorial teams, I guess, but you're right. I would like now, on a slightly different subject, to pick up on sort of something that you both mentioned in your presentations, because you sort of both hinted at the problem of the interaction between the two communities, between journalists and scientists, right? You told your own personal horror story of the tombola headline, about the tombola, US tombola researcher, and you mentioned the classic problem of interacting with scientists and having things explained in an accessible way, etc. So I would like you both to elaborate a bit on that in two ways. I mean, I have my own personal experiences, and I could also contribute to the discussion. But so, what would you say are the main things that often the other side doesn't understand of your job? But also, I will ask two questions in one. Do you see changing recently? Because honestly, for myself, for the younger generations of scientists, I have noticed quite some change to what used to happen, say, a couple of decades ago. But again, that may be my experience, and it's also different from country to country. But what would you say are the top things that scientists need to understand about how journalists work, and sometimes they are not so clear?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I think it's really important that we understand how to communicate with each other. First thing, as I said, we have a very different audience. I believe when a scientist, when a researcher, a professor works, its work is mainly addressed to a very specialized audience. So I think the classical scientific publishers, for instance. But there, in our case, we don't work like that. So we really have to start from sometimes the basics, and also to use a jargon, a language that is clear, understandable for every layperson. It will be key to have people reading or keep reading a story. And I encounter very often resistance there from the scientific community, people I interviewed, Sometimes, especially if they don't have an experience with journalists, they want to be too picky, let's say. So when I write an article in Switzerland, normally, according to law, the people can ask to review their quotes.
Can or can't?
They have the right to ask.
They have the right.
So if they ask for that, we have to send the quotes, the direct quotes, back for a check. But it doesn't mean that you have to change completely the meaning of what you said for an hour in a talk with me. So sometimes I have to be strict and say, no, you cannot completely change the meaning. Or very often when I have to do with scientists, they ask me for the entire article to check. They want to read the entire article because they said it's not enough for me to read just my quote. I need to understand the context, but I have always to explain that we need to keep our independent editorial line at the end, and not having a scientist kind of dictating what we should write or how we should write it. So it's a kind of a tension, because of course you have on the other side someone that is very knowledgeable, more than me, and I have to say it on a topic, but it's a mediation at the end, because we know how to, we should know how to reach the audience, how to really communicate with our audience. And sometimes mediating and being diplomatic on that is not so easy.
Yeah, if I can just briefly add a couple of thoughts to that. That's also my experience, and I think a lot of the experience of a lot of scientific journalists. Scientific editorial independence is a concept that is not always obvious, because the problem of people wanting to check quotes, people actually changing their quotes. I mean, trying to say something different from what they had actually said in the interview, because maybe it sounds bad when they read it on paper, is a classic. And also the request for checking the article. And this sometimes produces hard conversations. I very often, when there is this kind of debate, make the examples of other fields of journalism, meaning would you expect a political journalist to let, say, a politician check their article? No, you probably would, and you wouldn't trust the journalist if they do it. So the same applies to science, which is just another type of journalism, but it's still journalism. And then, in my experience, another thing that is not always shared is the timelines, right? The fact that a lot of journalism works on very fast deadlines and timelines, so replies have to be quick, and the turnaround time of the article has to be quick and can be adapted to the timeline of the person who's interviewed. That's also often a source of friction. But let's hear from the...
Yeah, I mean, first of all, clearly there is a problem of terminology. For instance, once I had this experience of the journalist confusing algorithm with logarithm, writing the interview. So I mean,
yeah.
So I prefer to check, not to change, but just to be sure that the terminology is correct. And that's a problem with mathematics in particular, because you say something which for you is trivial, and for the journalist is a new word, even if algorithm and logarithm, in my opinion, should be of general knowledge. But anyway, these kind of problems exist. So to be precise, it's not just a scientist pretending to control the article, but just to be sure that you are conveying the right meaning. But clearly, my first idea is that at the end of any communication act, you have to have some idea, some central idea you are conveying to the general public. And so the general audience on the other side. So what are people taking from what I'm saying now? So what they are taking at home message they are bringing with them at the end of this story. and that's very important. And clearly, that's the common job from journalists and scientists. Probably we have different agenda. Because, yeah. But now there is a generation of scientists who understand that we are changing. So they understand that, for instance, a conference, a big congress of scientists is not really a news. Nobody cares about a conference of mathematicians or physicists. So it is not a news that you can tell to the people, oh, there is a congress of mathematics in our town. Okay, I don't care. I don't read this news. But if you say that, for instance, is a brilliant young people and you want to know somebody more about this person, you have now some prize for that. This kind of news are attractive because you have a person. So you are motivated by probably a young person or a brilliant scientist. So if you can find an angle to enter the news, to say the same things, but from an entrance point, more interesting for people, maybe scientists understand that now. But 20 years ago, it was not the same. And so now we are changing this kind of communication. Every scientific society has a communicator, or they have some staff, some journalistic staff involved. There are some contact point with journalists. So, I mean, things are changing in this world. And I think clearly it is difficult to have the same goal, finally, because you want to, people are reading your news, and so I don't know, I prove a new theorem. Okay, it's not a news for you, again. But if I have a theory which is interesting because it's concerning, I don't know, an algorithm to detect colors in images, okay, people may be interested in the enhanced quality of images for the future, thanks to an algorithm doing that. And that's a news, not a theorem. The general theorem is maybe not interesting. So we have to probably to know better each
other's agenda. I think that's.
Because for me, the danger at the end is that we will tend to contact the same people. The same people, because also in academia, there are people that are very, very good at talking with journalists. And we like those people a lot because they make our life easy. And so I think someone, you know, Davide Scaramuzza, for instance, is a very important professor in robotics. Why do we go to him? Of course, his research is great and everything, but also because he is someone that is very good at talking with journalists. So this makes a big difference. But what happens is that at the end, always the same people, always the same research group, always the ones who are better at marketing themselves and at dealing with journalists will then have a platform. And of course, I have no interest to give a platform to the same people, but we want different voices, so young voices, not only big professors, but also people doing the lay job in academia. We want to hear from them too.
Yeah, no, that's a big point, really, because there is a problem, obviously, of diversity in the voices that are interviewed in many fields. I remember, I'll get to you in a second. I just as an example, I remember some years ago, it was, I think, during the pandemic, maybe, there is this super good journalist at The Atlantic, Ed Yong, who was covering the pandemic a lot, but also other topics. And at some point, he had made a policy for himself, and he kind of made it official by writing it on an article, that from then on, he would have made sure to quote people not only with more gender equality, making sure to quote more women in his stories, but also to reach out regularly to people he had never quoted in a story previously, in order to, you know, avoid always exposing the same people, which is a big temptation, because you know who works, you know who answers your phone call, and you tend to go to those people. Yes. Yeah, Francesca.
So thank you for this conversation, so it's super interesting. So, like, since there are both points of view, like the journalist and the scientist. I would say that probably the most important thing is to have like a relationship based on trust between the two of them. So I don't know if you have some like insights on how to build this trust. Something that happened, like that you can share. Something that happened to you, like how actually like the journalist can like trust the scientist and the opposite.
Quite a big question.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, for me, I can say coming to events like that, being present live and talk to the people, to people in academia live, so they can understand a bit more about me, about how I work. I think it's fundamental also to build this relationship. And by the time also for the scientist, it becomes easier when it's exposed also to the media, to understand who is working in a certain way and who is also trustworthy. So it's a job for me to do on the ground. So it's something that, of course, partly can be done via emails and at calls, but it's not enough.
In my experience, clearly the first part is to know each other. So to go in the same events, for instance, a science festival, and so to meet, to interact in reality. And also because now a lot of young scientific journalists have a scientific background, so maybe they know already the world of research, so it's easier for them to have this trust from scientists. And also have some moments where you meet together to think about communication of science. And there are some experience. In Italy, we have this conference in Trieste. There is the Master of Science Communication every 2 years. It is a big conference where scientists and communicators meet together. And we have other events where this kind of reflection, and so it's important for to discuss about this topic. So this kind of meeting is very important for me because I'm discussing with Sarah, and we are trying to know each other, and maybe in the future we can collaborate, for instance. And on this knowledge, maybe in the future there will be a better communication of science. Also, the goal of this communication is important. And all the time, scientists have not a clear idea of the main goal of communication of science. We can discuss about that. And the journalist has much more clear this. They say, what are the real goals in this kind of stuff? So,
yeah, just to sum up, because it's a great question, I personally agree that probably the key point is to be more clear-eyed from each side on how is the work of the other side actually organized, how it works, what are the roles, what are the dynamics, etc. And really acknowledge the fact that there are different goals, there are different agendas, and you can, sort of collaborate to a certain extent and also be confrontational on another level. But because it's very easy to say, oh, we all do this because we love science. And it's mostly true. I mean, both science journalists and scientists love science, but they still have different goals when they communicate it, whether personal or systemic. So I would say the first thing is to know what the other side really does. And
can I have just
yeah.
Okay, but just to be more clear, clearly for a scientist in Europe less than the United States, for instance, but you have you need to communicate because you want to attract more funds to your institution, one, but also because you want to promote science for people, for orienting people to be at the university in your topic, in mathematics more than in physics, more than in biology. And so you want to have a good press for pet. And so that's very basic, And I'm not sure that people understand that not all the time what they are doing is not the same they are doing in reality. They pretend to do this kind of promotion of science, but in reality they are doing promotion of themselves, for instance, or their own institution, not the general science. So this kind of situation of ambiguous.
Sarah, you
No,
wanted
but
to?
it's very nice because I was going to bring up the point, right? At what moment do we as scientists or do you as journalists decide that it's interesting to talk about the things that we are doing? And this was one question. So, because you made different examples before. I prove a new theorem, is that interesting? There is a Congress, is that interesting? But if I say that there is a young, brilliant person at the Congress, then that makes it interesting. But still, is this really interesting because there is a brilliant young person? And so there is that kind of scenario. So the first part of my question is, how do we, self-regulate the amount of exposure that we want our science to have? But then there is another different scenario that we saw, for example, very much during the COVID crisis, in which scientists were asked to speak under societal pressure in some sense. And one thing that really struck me there was the fact that, or at least this was my impression, I don't know, I would be curious to hear what you think about it, but the expectation of the listener were already, in some sense, complicating the possibility of true understanding. There is this myth of science as being an exact thing, for example. So how do we manage this type of expectations as people who are asked to intervene?
Which I think also brings the problem of the role of uncertainty inside, the problem of communicating uncertainty, especially. But
as a positive thing.
Yeah, as a positive, as an intrinsic element of science. But I think that the point you made about COVID is particularly interesting here, right?
But sorry, I use COVID, but there are other topics, right? I mean, it's the same now for AI. There is this media frenzy around quantum computing. So that there seems to be topics that at some point take off,
blow up
in the imagination or in the press. And I'm very curious about also that tension, right? How does that work?
Yeah, how much do you follow hype, or how much you try to? Because you have to follow it to a certain extent, right?
Hypes. I think we all are, but we as media, we are even more victims of hypes, because there is this problem of clickbaiting, so looking for clicks, looking for easy views, let's say, but this is also a trap, of course. I think there it's very important to be critical, and not to seize too much to these kind of narratives, which are at the end just in the interest of a few big tech companies, very often, and not of the bigger community of the people. And when we talk about how we choose stories, I mean, I think there is a mix of elements there. There is the news elements, there is also the personal intuition, and the thought, is there a personal story also that we can tell there, or is this research telling something more about us, about our humanity, about our daily lives, or not? Is it already used or applied to any kind of daily scenarios? These are questions at our level of reporting are very, very important to understand, because when we just take from enthusiasm sometimes for research that we find interesting, but without any kind of link with the world or the reality that people live every day, there is hard then to really convey a message that can be interesting enough for the average reader. Of course, there are also stories that can help people to be inspired, to imagine scenarios. These are also important stories. But there should be always that sort of human element behind it. Sometimes with high-end fundamental researchers, it's higher to underline or highlight.
Can I add something? I had a wrong assumption when I created this website 1 month. Then applied mathematics was much more interesting than pure mathematics. Because I said, oh, okay, people are not interested in abstraction and so on. So we have to bring application of mathematics. So we started with applied topics, but sometimes we publish other topics. And after 15 years in this website, we check the analytics, and the number one in topics searched from people is number theory. Number theory, because numbers enter the experience of many people much more than Navier-Stokes equation. Navier-Stokes equations are not searched. Fluid dynamics is not interesting. Even quantum mechanics is not really interesting, but number theory, everybody can understand numbers. They pretend to understand numbers, it's not sure, but they search an article about Riemann hypothesis had something like 40,000 clicks because people were searching for a theory about prime numbers. Yeah. And that's quite, it contradicts my belief. Before, my assumption was that, okay, I applied mathematics, so that's very interesting. And pure mathematics sometimes can be very interesting because people have a feeling about that.
I think too, it's connected with emotions, with feelings, with life, with trying to explain things about our humanity, which basics kind of mathematics in this sense can do more than other.
Yeah, advanced technology sometimes is very far from our personal experience. So, in some sense, if you just bring something about triangles, for instance, simple properties, people are interested, but in very general theory and advanced technology and so on, not so much. So, I mean, I was surprised by that.
Interesting.
Which leads me to a question. How do you know your audience? Because, right, the easy answer would be, of course, whatever communication you do, you pick stories, you pick subjects because they are the most important to your audience. But it's actually pretty difficult sometimes to understand who your audience is. Even when we have used the expression general audience a couple of times today, also for Swissinfo in general, but is there really something like a general audience? Because, you know, then nowadays with how communication works, audiences are fragmented geographically for interests, etc. So, but without getting too philosophical, I'm also interested operationally in an organization like Swissinfo, what kind of tools you use to actually know your audience is, where they live, what age they wear, what topics they really care about more. You know, do you just try? Do you see how they react to stories they do and adapt in real time? Do you have structured research? Because it's quite key.
Yeah, of course, it's really important to understand with whom you are speaking. It's not so easy though, even with all these tools. We use different tools. One of the most important ones is a data analytics tool, so a website analyzing different metrics of our articles from the geographical area where they are read, how many views, time spent per article, so very different metrics, if it was referred, if it's coming from social media or our website. So there are so many different things that we can understand. One thing that we know at Swissinfo is that we have the problem of retention. It means that it's difficult for us to keep our readers loyal. So we have many people coming to our website. We have millions of views every month. But really having the same people loyal that keep coming to us, it's hard. So we know that we have a very good index on Google, so we are ranked always high. That's why people discover us when they are looking for something, but then
They don't come back, they don't
it's
always.
hard. I think with social media, we journalists too, we can understand a bit who our audience is. On LinkedIn, for instance, you have also a bit of relationship with the audience, writing comments and trying to establish contact with you. And this is a way in. In other social media, sometimes I'm disappointed when I think about Facebook and my audience there. I would like them to close everything and say it's probably doesn't
Stop
make any
looking.
sense that I write, because I understand that after the first line, probably they don't read anymore, but they comment and they're very critical sometimes. So yeah. I mean.
Yeah. Well, yeah, LinkedIn has grown a lot, I think, in importance also for editorial, for publishing in the last few years, because if you go past all the self-promotion of all the people, it's actually more of a written-based media and more controlled than Facebook and Twitter. But also you, Roberta, I mean, when you started this thing, how do what audience you had in mind who would go out and read the comics about science?
Okay, about comics, I had a precise audience, which was the audience by people coming to Luca Comics.
Okay,
Luca Comics is the greatest event
so
in Europe.
more comics enthusiasts than science enthusiasts.
The nerd community.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, you have 500,000 young people coming to Luca every year. It's the biggest events in comics in Europe, much more than Angoulême in France, for instance. And so people interested, focused, they have a lot of attention on details of the customer or the cosplayer and so on. Or they play cards like Magic or something like that. And so they are very good focus. And I was impressed from that. And so this kind of people between, 18 and 30 years old was my target at the beginning. And with an interest in curious fact. I mean, they have an interest for technology, science, abstract ideas, but quite not focused on mathematics, for instance, more general. Okay, that's what it was my first approximation. But then now I'm a fan of analytics. I spend a lot of time on analytics, looking even real time where people are connecting from and so on. It's really crazy. And there are some articles you don't expect they have a success. They have a lot of clicks. When you propose that, you believe that, okay, nobody cares about that. And they start with a simple exercise in geometry. And probably teachers are using this example for some classroom. I don't know, but that's interesting, this kind of, and we have events, public events, where people come and they ask for more contents in some direction or another. Clearly also, we propose something which is interesting for us. And it works at times, it doesn't work, so we are not paid for that. It's my job is given by CNR and the other people working on this kind of problems are all from the university, so we have a salary every month. So that's a different perspective with respect to professional working in news. You need to have this kind of people coming on your website. If they don't come, okay, it's not our problem. But clearly, I see some trends, and unexpected trends like the number theory, for instance. Teaching, probably people in the school are much more interested in mathematics, parents also, and they look for good books for children or good topics to have a good classroom, so a laboratory, mathematics, and so on. So we try to tune our communication to meet this kind of community.
Yeah, sure. I do have quite a few more questions, so you will stop me when it's time. Okay. there was something that I think came up both in your presentation and also in something we were discussing at lunch with Roberto before. The fact that good communication is very often a team work, right? Like in an editorial team, you need editors to check what you are doing and to, double check, possibly improve, etc. And also that the stuff that you have presented there is by definition a lot of people involved. Now, I'm interested about this also in relation to something that is happening now in communication that we see as a trend, that is, the rise of newsletters, which are, all the rage at the moment in the business, right? There are these sites like Substack that allow you to become your own personal brand, and to journalists, or also scientists for that matter, to create their own channel and communicate with no editors, reach their audience directly, and also get revenue directly from their audience, etc. And so my personal opinion is that you actually lose a fundamental part of the profession when you do that, because without people often present it proudly as an improvement. Oh, I can do journalism on Substack with no editors interfering with my work, and I personally think it's a big loss, because it's a group. It should be a group work. But again, it's happening. It's also having a lot of success for some people. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that, on what actually teamwork adds in value to good journalism, to good science communication, etc.
Yeah, I think there we are talking about different aspects, because what's happening with Substack, for instance, is, for me, it's more personal branding of individual journalists who want to be more visible and more successful and build their own image and their own brand, also with good kind of reasons, because they can, and they have a professionality, and it's not a judgmental.
In some famous cases, if I can add, that they were famous journalists who had been fired by big editorial teams, like Glenn Greenwald or Barry Weiss from the New York Times. Nate Silver, of course. So they needed something else, and they succeeded.
Yeah. Also because media organizations are big organizations with, as I said, processes. Sometimes it can be also heavy. So I think it's not a bad thing if a journalist can have a direct relationship with its audience. Actually, I think it's good, because we want more people to rely on good journalism. But yeah, what you said before, it's different when you have to deal with all the processes, because it is a guarantee that there will be standards followed, and also that at the end the product will be a guarantee of some sort of quality as well. That is so important today, where as I said, we see news that can be easily manipulated and if not completely made up by instruments like AI. So still, this group work is important, also because I think the work of journalists it has to be also confrontational. So you have to have this confrontation with your peers, with your colleagues, journalists. You have to have the confrontation with the editor. As I said before, the relationship is not always so plain and smiles. It can be also difficult, because typically editors want to kill all our dialing. So all the places where we put more effort and more emotions in an article, they typically want to cut it for some time. So this is at the end the important work that should be there, the structure of journalism, and I see more on the side than the personal branding part.
Yeah, but I bring my point of view. I mean, for a scientist, clearly a newsletter is a new tool Because, okay, you need a channel of communication, because even if you create a repository like a website where you put some contents, even if the institutional website, nobody goes to the website by himself. Okay, so that's clear that you have to convey this kind of information. Social media gave the illusion to people that you can do that by opening a Facebook page or Twitter page, X page, or LinkedIn page, but it doesn't work very much now because people are distracted, they are scrolling their smartphone and probably they skip your information all the time. Newsletter can be a sort of a workshop where you can show what you are doing in a synthetic way. So for an institution to have a newsletter, I think it's a good idea for a group of scientists to have a fidelization of people. So it's not just promoting themselves, to create something which is standard, a point where you can access information, and it is in your email box. So in sense, it's a tool. It's not just the final goal of my communication to have a newsletter, but it's quite effective. MadMat says 1,700 people, readers, fixed readers, for mathematical, Italian mathematical website is a lot. Because I don't know this kind of people. They just come and they read the newsletter and they are looking for the new one, and they wait for that. And that's interesting, this kind of phenomenon. You create something, a feeling, a sort of
relationships, which is. Sarah, you wanted to?
Yes, but I wanted to switch gears a little bit, going back to something that struck me in Sarah's presentation. There was a slide in which you were talking about those that are left behind. And that sort of brings me circling back to I think maybe the beginning of this conversation, which is, why do we really care about the need of doing scientific communication towards the general public? And I don't want to, close on a heavy or too philosophical note, but is there like a societal responsibility part of this? Is doing this also a way to try to leave less people behind? Or do you think that in the end this is self-promotion of scientists or being sure that the implications of technologies are known, but at an abstract level? Is there, say, an ethical push to do this as well? Sorry, I don't really know what I want to ask, but I think this is.
No, I think I understood your point. And yeah, it's very important because science should be universal, but the reality is that it's not universal. The reality is that there are so many different among people who can access the scientific developments and progress that scientists make every day or in their community. Research and discoveries are typically too expensive or just addressed to a few communities. I think just about the COVID vaccines. We were talking about COVID before. For the same reason, COVID vaccines could not reach for a long time many communities in the world also impacted badly by COVID, and which also brings back to the fact that if they are badly impacted at one point, we will be too, because we are living in a world which is connected. We don't live in our own bubbles like on social media. So it's so important that we don't forget that, for the same reason that many people don't have access to digital tools, to the internet, even though for us it's taken for granted, it's not at all. So I think for us as journalists, drawing the attention on this is important, because at one point it will sound the alarm to the people who can change that. Because of course I, as a journalist, I would like, but I cannot change directly things, but I can push people, decision makers to take wise decisions there.
No, but I agree completely. In the sense that at the end of the day, I started just for a sort of self-defense. I mean, I have to justify why the taxes to the public money are going to research. So if I create a sort of background where people understand why science is important for the society, I can justify just also my salary in some sense. When not to have more funds, my goal is just to keep my funds that they are not deleting institution because they say, okay, you know, in England, sometimes UK, sometimes I go, they just closed the pure mathematics department because they said, oh, pure mathematics is not needed in this town. So they are just going to teach other people, but they are not doing research in pure mathematics because it's not useful. So if you create a background of consensus, okay, you explain to people why your research in the future can be culturally interesting, not just not for application, but also for the human culture. Yeah. It's important, I think, in general, and even if it's not obvious to do that. I mean, it's not an easy goal.
No.
Yeah, but it's my goal now.
Yeah, there is this thing that is often said, this formula that I think it's very true, that, you know, the people who are going to be most impacted by future, you know, scientific or technological developments are the least involved in the conversation, because whether it's AI or climate change, you know,
Yeah.
the people who will, you know, feel the consequences are mostly not people who read the Nature and Science. So it's also our job as communicators to involve them in the conversation or bring their priorities and their needs to the fore. So I think, unless there are, you know, last minute raised hands from the online audience, that I would go on forever, but our speakers also have trains to catch at some point. So I will thank you all for the attention. I think it's been a very interesting conversation. And yeah, just thank again Sara Ibrahim and Roberto Natalini, and yeah, give you all appointments to the next events that Sara reminded us at the beginning. Thanks a lot.